This is a smaller scale project, and it's in Rhode Island, which if it were better named, it would be called Road Estuary, because it's mostly an estuary with a lot of coastal lagoons and wetlands. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the visualizations here, because I have some enlarged versions before. But the key things, this is a highly vulnerable, low-lying area, one of the original colonial settlements in North America, one of the original English colonial settlements. Of course, like everything in North America that was of historic value, we built a highway over it. It's been repeatedly inundated over the years. Now, you'll notice we have a relatively small number of innovations applied, and that's because we've taken a very bottom-up approach to the process. All of our IGC work has been integrated into our community engagement work. And so our requirements, I'll just hit this quickly before I show you the next slide, are developed from the community, are that residents are able to remain in their homes as long as possible. And that is people are not unrealistic about the fact that by 2100, most of the areas that in our study area will be underwater. Preservation of marshes as natural storm buffers are key, preservation of beaches. These are things that are really tied to the lifestyle of the local area, and maintaining housing affordability are other key factors. And really, a way to think about our project is saying, how do we deal with these areas that are going to present residual risks over the long term, where it makes no sense to prematurely abandon them, but where abandonment is likely inevitable? Our innovations applied are mostly modeling for coastal urban resilience and risk reduction. We've used both AdCirc modeling and the sea level affecting marsh migration model, green infrastructure, and then we're also proposing a couple of innovations, the use of thin layer deposition to elevate marsh platforms, which is a way to help marshes keep up with sea level rise. The survivability of a marsh depends largely on the availability of sediment to keep up with sea level change, and the use of small scale alternative wastewater treatment. These three images on the right is our 3D model of this area rendered with current build out. On the far left is a 1939 photo made very soon after the Great New England / Long Island Express tropical cyclone of 1938. And you can see that the area was just being platted in 1939, that by 1951 there had been quite a bit of landfill using dredge spoils from one of the channels in Narragansett Bay. And so the key point of this is we have these very substantial storms that have overwashed this area. The vast majority of the build out has never been tested by a storm. Like all good projects, it starts with a workshop or many workshops. This is done in collaboration with the Coastal Resilience Center, which is a nonprofit extension arm of the University of Rhode Island, and also with the Nature Conservancy, and we were brought into the process to bring in this visualization component. And one of the key takeaways, or one key takeaway I'll share with you from our initial workshopping was that we had this incredible consensus and enthusiasm for improving storm response, but the overall response regarding sea level rise, quoting a local counselor, was, "We don't want to talk about it because it's just bumming us out." And there's really an incredible paralysis. A lot of things are happening in nearby areas, such as sunny day flooding during astronomical high tides, septic failures. A lot of these things are viewed separately in a disconnected way. And there's a lot of paralysis around those issues. The very interesting thing about this area is that the things that make this a really desirable area to live, the fact that housing is affordable, this is one of the few remaining working class coastal neighborhoods in Rhode Island that hasn't been gentrified and rebuilt with larger houses that expand the vulnerability, is really tied to the lack of infrastructure. So for instance, if there were a sewer in this area, something that would prevent nutrient pollution, the houses would be much larger and much more expensive, right? Because they're geometrically constrained by small lots and the availability of space for septic waste disposals, which are failing. And so that's actually conspired to keep the housing to a point where you've got people with modest incomes, the median income of this area, the median income of the area is only about $75,000, which as you compare it to other coastal communities is comparatively low. And then it's tied to the cultural way of life. People who have boats, who go on the beach, who enjoy the salt marshes, all of these different things. All of this is tied to the high hazard exposure. And so it's very much a question of dealing with a cultural way of life. So we used visuals. Our initial outreach with visualization work was by way of visualization surveys. Visualizations on the left are for 1 foot and 3 feet, 0.33 and 0.9 meters of sea level rise, respectively, for the Common Fence Point neighborhood and the Island Park neighborhood. And you'll notice we're not representing inundation. And really what we're using is the outputs from the SLAM model, the sea level affecting marsh migration model, and we're coding roads as being obstructed because we're trying to connect the impacts to the things that people are experiencing or seeing in the news with other areas of being abandoned. If there's one thing that I can accomplish other than getting people to pronounce Lickert correctly is that we would stop using sea level projections that are sea level plus a 1% storm event, right? Because this immediately puts things into a level where people can't engage or connect them to their daily lives. It's simply so overwhelming that we might as well just give up. And on the right is a reconstruction of the 1954 Hurricane Carol at present sea level rise. I've spent time with survivors of the 38 storm. Sea level is actually about a foot higher now than it was in the 1938. So at present build out, a storm like Hurricane Carol is pretty much game over for this area. So the thing is people are willing to accept that provided they can evacuate, and it may be 30 or 40 years before we get to that point. So just some quick things to highlight from our survey. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this except to point out the SLR expectation on the far right. One of the questions we asked people, and we used stakeholder perceptions to set the sea level scenarios. The median and average expectation of the stakeholders in the area was actually very closely tied to expert projections. And in fact, a lot of people had the perception that people had unrealistic expectations. Actually, people had very realistic expectations, they just didn't want to deal with it. On the bottom, you can see our priority for evaluating what constitutes success in our community concerns. We're actually using some of these criteria in our post work. These visualizations, these two visualizations, these are the visualizations that made the difference in a lot of our community engagement processes. On the right is a realistic visualization of what 3 foot of sea level rise would look like in terms of its implications in the landscape. On the left is our 2035 visualization, which shows some of our improvements like an escape road from one part of Common Fence Point and elevating this section of road to act as a buffer, which allows for the protection of a series of homes in this area and the maintenance of access. There are a lot of small strategies here. And this was a winning combination with the community because they understood that they had a positive option. And the thing about the visualization on the right is a lot of times we show them people visualizations of the future, but unfortunately it's just the same conditions with a blue overlay. So the future is the same, only wetter. And in emotional terms, seeing what abandonment looked like, being able to look on this map and not find your house, seeing that the park had literally disappeared, not only been converted to marsh, but converted to ocean by the SLAM model, made an immense impact and really has motivated people around this 2035 early adopter visualization. Lastly, I'll close with, this is Flo's Clam Shack, which was equally as important to the EPSCoR who funded us. Thank you, EPSCoR. Flo's Clam Shack has been destroyed and rebuilt 5 times by tropical cyclones, which is how you know it's really good. And then this is our enormous team from URI, GSO, CRC, and of course, our raft of student researchers. Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Guoping. Sorry, for the presenters, let me just reiterate tell you the sequence because there is a couple of changes here. Rhode Island School of Design we've just heard from, University of Virginia, is next. After that will be the University of Seoul, then Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Penn State, University of Southern California, then it will be SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, and then there'll be a short break, and then the University of Cincinnati will be after that. Okay? That's the order from now on.
Hello, my project is in the fast-growing city of Winneba in Ghana, and it's right next to a international Ramsar site, which is called the Muni Lagoon. And this is actually the second iteration of the IGC approach in this multi-year and multidisciplinary project. And instead of looking at regional issues, as we did the last time, we are now zooming into this 2 by 2 kilometer interface between the city and the lagoon. So this region has all kinds of problems, and you can think of very typical to Western Africa cities. And if you look at the non-adopter scenario, the fast urban growth is going to take over a large territory of the landscape, and with no natural vegetation left. The rest of the land will be taken over by agricultural expansion, and they will generate a huge amount of agricultural runoff, urban waste into the lagoon directly. So there's also overfishing problem, food crisis, all kinds of things, you would name it. So we are actually looking at different innovations and interventions, which I'm going to introduce later. So this is basically the area, and then the city, and the lagoon. So we did a lot, achieved a lot just last year, and we took another 16 students from all different programs to Winneba again. For the first time, I didn't deal with any health emergencies for the first time. That was wonderful. And we received the endorsement from the mayor in his half-finished office, as you can see. And also we received the endorsement from a local paramount chief in his office, as you can see, decorated by deer skins and antlers from the annual deer festival, but unfortunately they are not able to find the deer during their festival. We took lots of epic hikes into different landscapes and communities and had conversations with, for example, fishermen there, and we had workshops with local people and stakeholders. And our students, they're all still design students, they were asked to find ways to address those issues reactively, responding to the community needs, and also proactively try to bring in new visions to those problems. And following the IGC approach, we actually bring the temporal perspective into the design exercise, which is not quite common in a typical design studio. We ask the students to think about how those projects can be done later, what kind of things might be changed if you do that later. And there were lots of interesting discussions because some designs have compromised because of the, it could only be done 15 years later. And some designs actually, the success of some designs is actually based on another project. So there will be a lot of interconnections between those projects. So just quickly give you some examples of the projects students looked at. For example, the ecological restoration of the Antakwafa River flowing through the city. The reforestation program, trying to physically define an urban growth boundary with productive trees, like coconut trees, with banners hanging in between the trees, no build zone. One student was inspired by the Nobel Prize laureate, Mangari Mate in Kenya, who initiated the community-based tree planting program over there. And she wanted to use the community-based tree planting program to reclaim some of the vacant spaces in the city with productive trees. At the same time, to introduce well-needed urban amenities like biogas toilets, fresh water supply, and waste management sites together in one urban park, new urban park. Planning students are looking at new urban development with higher density and more integrated into the landscape with both green and gray infrastructure. And we focus a lot on alternative livelihood in the region. For example, students were looking at the possibility of a butterfly farm at a commercial scale. Another student looked at how to repurpose the abandoned salt ponds into fish farm, algae farm, etc., to provide alternative livelihood for fishermen over there. And architecture students look at the possibility of opening up a new center of agriculture and food to introduce sustainable practice, farming practice, as well as healthy diet to the local communities. And they also envisioned a new lagoon research center placed there, and which can also work as a visitor center and a exhibition culture center for the future ecotourism development. And so that's the spatial arrangement of all the projects. And then in the summary that, of course, that the early adoption is actually the best scenario because a lot of things can be addressed immediately and it generates a lot of economic benefits, social benefits, and environmental benefits. And what's really interesting is actually the late adopter model. And we had a big discussion, not only with students, and also with the local stakeholders, so that they really see the urgency of doing something immediately. And we also talk about that if we do nothing in the next 15 years, there will be huge cost of doing nothing. Because, for example, like it's difficult to maintain the growth boundary, and there will be a large urban area, future urban area, inundated frequently by future floods. And the local fishermen will lose their livelihood very soon, and they have to do informal plastic waste recycling business on the beach, just similar to other coastal communities over there. So we feel like it's very important also to keep the current momentum going right now because we now have the political support. Nobody can guarantee that we have the same support in the next 15 years, after 15 years. So let me finish with this slide that we feel like we've touched upon almost all SDG goals, but it's just a beginning because it's more important to realize those goals in the next 30 years. And I want to finish with this, my favorite photo from this area. And 5 minutes after I took the photo, I joined this guy in the beachside pool just to enjoy a moment of peace right between this impoverished fishing village and the raging nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Guoping. Our next presenter is Youngmin Kim, who is from the University of Seoul, and he will be talking about an alternative futures for Dongtan New Town. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Our site is located in the city called Dongtan New Town. In 2001, Korean government decided to develop the 3,300 hectare land, 30 kilometers from the Seoul, targeting 400,000 population by 2021. It is one of the second generation Korean New Town model. And this area is a production hub for the high-tech industry of South Korea. For example, most of the Samsung semiconductor factories and those research centers are located in this area. So the Dongtan New Town was planned to supply the housing for the middle-class income level population, mostly the employees and their families of high-tech companies. And I didn't put the picture of the site here, but you can just imagine the city. There's a realization of the Le Corbusier's dream of the towers in the park. So most of the housings are average 20-story height, and FAR is more than 400. The city has been developed into two phases. This is the part called Dongtan 1, and this is the city called Dongtan 2, quite simple name. And this part of the city is completed in 2011, and this is on construction now, targeting 2021. And our site is located in between these two cities. This is weird-shaped empty land. So the government decided to build the traditional housing complex, but they abandoned that plan and they're seeking for the alternatives. The traditional housing means it's really the old type of Korean housing, and it doesn't really work. It's for the tourist kind of a reason. So let me go to the requirements. Among those various assumptions, the most important one assumption was this city will get older. Based on the past statistical analysis, there has been a tendency of not much population immigration happens in the new town in South Korea once they're settled. So this means after 30 years, the age group will be mainly the old generations. So, okay, the city will get older. This means the assumption leaded us to the two alternatives. First, adapt to the change, make the city more senior-friendly. And the second, fight against the change, make the city more attractive to the younger generation. So, these are one of our scenario A, which associated with the early adopter scenario. And before getting into our scenario, I would like to mention one of our team's biggest challenge. Our team was a collaborative team of landscape architects, urban designers, and architects and researchers. The biggest challenge of our team was to compromise different egos of different fields who thinks they are also the experts on the other fields. It's not only about the students, it's also faculty members, and I need to persuade the designers who think geodesign is not a design. And this is go back to the Carl Steinis, the soloist problem. Our design is much finer grain for the whole site. Typically, we do this two phases, like geodesign and those kind of detailed design parts. So our challenge was how to integrate those. And this scenario is following basically the compact city model in order to increase the accessibility for the senior peoples to the urban and the natural amenities. This site was developed in the three districts, and it's really compactly and high densely developed. And these are some areas. And scenario B is focusing on more the natural preservation. So this assumes a halt on the intensive development will rather improve the ecological condition of the site. So there's a smaller 8 zones you can see in this diagram, and this is normally the mixed use programs, residential, commercial, and high-tech industry land use combined. So these are some more details, examples of our design. And then it's the geoscientist part. We have a separate analyst team who closely work with the two design teams through the whole design process. So based on SDG indicators, we developed a more specific index for the impact model in addition to those table provided by IGC. This is the part of the fulfilling those researchers' ego. And so we did some kind of a simulation model to assume the non-adapter model. And if you see this analysis, since our team, design team work comparatively in really detailed scale of design, getting into the individual building massing, IGC system was applied to the almost individual building level, and also the really single park level. So, and there's also the problem of the different floor level have different programs. So these are the one example of how we deal with those kind of analysis with detailed designs. So these are the result of the more detailed impact model analysis. So these are the indicators we applied based on these are based on the SDG indicators. So this last picture is showing how we brought the students who are trained as a soloist and still want to be a soloist in the future into the one team using the design framework and borrowing some of the Carl Steinis's workshop technique. I think this was quite successful, and I hope this will help for the whole our IGC process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Young Kim. Next presentation is from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Ellis Boisford, and Benny Encinas.
He's not here.
He's not here.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Ellis.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Ellis Boisvert. I'm from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. and our project is in Mariposa County, and it's a sister project to the one that was presented yesterday, but instead of taking the approach of trying to mitigate fires in Mariposa County, we're actually focusing more on, we're focusing more on the economy and building the community in Mariposa County. So, a little bit of background about Mariposa.
Go back one slide.
Oh, you want to go back? Well, this is the one I want to be on. So Mariposa County is very rural. There's no real cities, and there's no more than 2,500 people in each of them. And the largest aspect of the economy is tourism, with more than 5 million people coming through Mariposa County annually. And something that those people don't know is that though they're coming from Yosemite for the natural beauty, something that they're missing in Mariposa County is that same thing. So, though Mariposa is located in such a naturally beautiful area, the economy is still struggling, and that's because the tourists that pass through Mariposa County are only passing through along one major artery, and they're missing a lot of the population because Mariposa's population is so spread out. And because it's so spread out, it's also really hard for the residents to identify with one cohesive community identity, and because of this, the public health suffers, with the obesity rates being 2% larger than the state average, and the rate of overweight adults being 21% larger than the state average. And in addition, as I'm sure you learned about yesterday, wildfires are also really present in Mariposa, and though that's not the focus of the project, that's also something we want to take into account. So after talking with people from Mariposa, the residents, and some of the public agencies at a workshop, we decided the project approach should be to connect all the major communities, to make Mariposa more of a destination instead of a means to get to and from Yosemite in order to bolster the tourist economy and create a better experience for tourists and locals to experience the natural beauty that's so undersold. So some of the requirements for this to work are to increase the economic gains for the county via that tourist market, to develop the county's sense of community, to connect all the major communities, and to showcase the natural beauty that I've been mentioning. And some of the ways we did this in terms of innovations are using mixed-use developments in the larger towns, and that creates a more vibrant downtown setting to attract the tourists and to keep them in those towns that they wouldn't necessarily be doing before, and also to build relationships between the residents that they wouldn't necessarily be able to before. Also, another notable innovation is bike sharing and e-bikes, and that allows tourists, that's a really attractive thing for tourists because it's really accessible, it's really easy, and they can use those along our proposed trail system while also supporting the local economy. So right here are some representative images of the rural vernacular that Mariposa adopts. So those are some of the downtown areas in Mariposa County. And on the top left is a concept image of how we might merge that vernacular with something a little more exciting and enticing for the tourist market. So in our early adopter scenario, what you see is a lot of mixed-use development in the downtowns to create that vibrant downtown setting that we were talking about. And in addition, we're going to use commercial incentives in order for the residents of Mariposa County to benefit on an individual level while also supporting the county's economy on a general level. As we move to the late adopter, we see the current path they're taking being more integrated into our plan, which is more sprawling, and it creates less of a vibrant downtown environment. And as we move to the non-adopter, we see the current path that Mariposa County is taking, which takes no efforts to create a vibrant downtown environment in order to boost the economy. So in the SDG graphics, what we see as we move from early adopter to non-adopter is in this area, which is in tourist and residential, we see a large detriment. And that's because Mariposa County's economy and the sense of community can't benefit without having some sort of developed downtown and people present when tourists go through, because if there's not, then they're just not going to want to stay. So this is our master plan, And what we did is we connected all the major communities in Mariposa via a large multi-use trail system, which goes from Coulterville up in the top left to Mariposa in the bottom. And that connects proposed and existing trails, and it also promotes active lifestyles for the users, and centered around some of the larger communities are different uses of trails, such as hiking, mountain biking, and equestrian trails, in order to promote that active lifestyle that I was mentioning and provide opportunities for the tourists coming through. And the program elements that we put in to this design are meant to reflect the community of Mariposa as well as accomplish those other goals I mentioned before. So this is the same image that I was showing earlier, and I already kind of talked about it, but it also serves as a gathering space for the community members of Mariposa County. And something that was really taken into account with this part is the aesthetic aspects, and that was really heavily considered in order to incorporate the rural vernacular, which is really important in Mariposa County, with something that's a little more attractive to visitors. So this is another aspect of our design which provides a unique experience for visitors to experience Mariposa County in a natural setting. And this runs along the largest part of our trail in a 7-day long hiking experience. And at each day interval, there would be one of these locations to spend the night, which provides water, energy, and waste management systems in a self-sustained environment in order to respect the natural landscape, and which is really important in Mariposa County. And this last part right here, because there's a lot of wildland-urban interface communities in Mariposa County, those are something that need to be protected, and wildfires are also extremely present in Mariposa County, so this acts as a buffer zone, which is multi-use, so it incorporates recreational and fire breaks into one thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellis. Our next presentation is from Dan Meehan from Penn State University, and he's going to be talking about urban revitalization of a U.S. Rust Belt city.
Thanks, Brian. How are we all doing? Thank you. Yesterday we talked about a project that we did with residential courses. This project is something we did in our Geodesign program, which is an online master's degree program. So this is a fall studio taught by Jim Sipes, who's here somewhere, and myself. I helped out with the GIS aspects. So we looked at urban revitalization in Utica, New York. So here we're looking at Utica from way back when, kind of what it looked like, and a little bit of a comparison now, just to give you an idea for context. So for those who don't know what a Rust Belt city is, it's basically all about decline in population. Took place around the 80s. It was about the decline of industry, which led to all these other things, increased employment rate, increased welfare and costs. And you can see here's Oneida County where Utica is. So it experienced approximately 43 to 56% loss in jobs. So one of the things we wanted to look at this project was kind of how, this issue just isn't Utica. It's all over. As you can see, the Rust Belt extends all the way through to Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. So this isn't a problem that's just specific to Utica. I have never been to Utica, but when you create evaluation layers, you can become intimately familiar with the place, or as intimately you can without being. But thankful for Google Earth and the Esri products for helping me with this. But the things I did notice is there's some beautiful architecture, right? We have some beautiful theaters. There's really nice buildings there. There's a lot of churches in the downtown area, a very, very large amount of churches. But with it, we have, because of the Depression, there's a lot of blight. So you can see a lot of empty homes and just a lot of random vacant lots right in the middle of the urban downtown area. But our project focused on the new hospital that's going in. And they kind of did this process in a black box. They said, we need a new hospital. We're gonna hire a planning firm to figure out. And they said, here, we're just gonna put it here. They didn't really do too much public input. There's been a large community outcry. There's an activist group, No Hospital Downtown group. But you can see they've got some pretty nice renderings of what it's gonna look like. But if you train your attention to the top left image, you can see hospital here, parking, surface parking everywhere. And this is existing in the downtown, so they're talking about knocking down areas. They do have there have been talk of adding a casino and a nice park area, but that has never, it's not official part of the plan or anything, it's just a pretty picture for now. So to show you just the kind of existing conditions we have in the upper map and the bottom map, you can see in the red where the hospital is going to go. So you can see they are taking out existing, it's mostly commercial mixed-use area. Doesn't seem to be performing very well. It's a little underperforming, but still you can see the decline. They're increasing in about 10 acres of parking. They're decreasing a bunch of their commercial area. Just to kind of give you, this is what they're actually talking about doing. So I'm just going to talk about our requirements real quick before I get to the next part, but we just assume populations will grow older. They'll be more concentrated in the urban area. We want to try to draw people to that downtown area, not push them away. We'll have a more smart network, and the pollution concerns will intensify. A lot of our process was around how can we build a more resilient landscape, so around the green infrastructure stuff and the mixed housing, how can we bring more people into the town rather than away, and also maybe looking at what other changes could they do for the hospital. So in our early scenario, we had actually, you can see existing, but we actually moved the hospital this is their arena they have, so they want to put it 2 blocks away, so students thought it would be better situated a little closer. So you can see in this area, there's already some vacant lots, so it wouldn't be as much, they wouldn't need to knock down as many buildings. But you can see we have a lot more green infrastructure incorporated, a lot of the housing remains, and we think it's going to be more of a vibrant downtown area if they do the early adopter. The late adopter, we said they would put the hospital where it's going to go, so you can see it's not quite as good. Some of the housing goes away, there's not as much green infrastructure, and then in the late adopter, we just said they couldn't decide on building the hospital, so they did not build it, and there's a lot of vacancy. A lot of those residential areas kind of go away, people move out, so that's how that lined up. And then, so yeah, I think this was a good project. This was just a rendering, a city engine rendering that one of our students put together of the potential. If they did, maybe instead of all the surface lots, they put a parking garage in, and then a lot of more green infrastructure structure around. So this was a good kind of scratching the surface project. We hope to we were planning on doing it again in the fall with a more nuanced look at the mixed-use development. So sadly, the construction is going on right now. They've already started to knock down buildings, so it looks like this hospital is going to go where they wanted it to go. So we'll look then at what they can do to kind of plan around that, what changes they can make, and then again, kind of look deeper into how what we're trying to solve can be applied to other Rust Belt cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Our next presentation is from the University of Southern California, and it's going to be presented by Jackson Fitzgerald, Lily Nye, and Sarah Tarr.
How's everyone doing? Great. I did want to skip ahead to our third slide just so we can recognize our entire project team. I'm Lily, and these are my colleagues Sarah and Jackson. We also wanted to thank our research advisors, Dr. John Wilson, Han Nguyen, and Bo McDonald. Our research project centers on superblocks, which are an emerging mobility strategy originating from the city of Barcelona. I'll be briefly discussing our project background and context, and then handing it off to Sarah and Jackson to talk about specific project examples, adopter scenarios, and impacts on SDG goals. Superblocks are a mobility model which reorient vehicular traffic to the perimeter of apportioned city blocks, allowing further reclamation of interior streets as people-oriented spaces. Beyond just reducing motorized traffic and improving air quality, superblocks provide a breadth of opportunities to roll back hardscape, increase commercial activity, enhance social cohesion, and promote active lifestyles. Our project examines superblocks in the context of the city of LA, an enormous metropolitan area that is notorious for its congestion and traffic. Considering that there is only an average of 4.72 acres of green space per 1,000 residents, and only 36% of adults meeting recommended levels of physical activity, the city stands to benefit from a transformative paradigm shift. And to this end, our geodesign research project employs multi-criteria evaluation to investigate candidate sites for 15 pilot superblocks across the city of LA, one in each council district. Selection criteria included flat topography and a general grid network, arterial street boundaries with some forming a part of LADOT's high injury network, adjacency to transit, high population density, and park accessibility. And our process centers specifically on a candidate site identified in the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council, which I will hand off to Sarah to talk about next.
The assumptions we followed for our project area are that populations will continue to grow and that they will grow older. Whoops. Populations will be concentrated in urban areas, pollution concerns will intensify, and global temperatures and climate variability will rise. Here's a list of the innovations that we utilized. In the early adopted scenario, we will close off all interior streets for pedestrian-only use, install speed reduction zones at intersections with arterial streets, and implement most of our innovations, all of which would be completed by 2035. In the late adopter scenario, these plans would be completed by 2050. Our ideas for how to transform the study area can be explained through projects at 3 different levels: the schools, the streets, and the homes. Innovations we would implement in schools include removing some of the hardscape and replacing them with grass fields, building gardens for the students, and installing energy-efficient measures in the buildings. Changes we would make at the street level include establishing community gardens, replacing the asphalt with permeable surfaces, creating spaces for farmers markets and recreational activities, and installing basketball courts/playgrounds for the community. The benefits of street-level changes would be extended with residential-oriented innovations, such as implementing a program that encourages the switch to high-efficiency household appliances, converting hardscape to water-wise edible gardens, and planting more trees to increase shade cover. I will now pass it to Jackson to discuss our SDG Matrix.
Through our research, we determined that the implementation of superblocks would greatly aid in reaching the SDG goals as laid out by the United Nations. In our project, we determined specific infrastructure changes that we thought that superblocks would bring about in cities such as Los Angeles. Then we looked at how these specific changes would affect the goals. For example, superblocks can increase the amount of green infrastructure in an area such as urban gardens. Urban gardening is shown to directly increase the health and well-being of the people within the community. Therefore, we felt comfortable saying that superblocks would increase the good health and well-being of a community. Our main SDGs that we affected with this project were sustainable cities and communities, good health and well-being, life on land, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. I mainly want to talk about sustainable cities and good health and well-being. Superblocks have as their main goal making communities more sustainable and also improving the health of the people that live there. For example, through sustainable cities, the implementation of superblocks through changing transport patterns to increase public transit, to also allow for higher levels of water infiltration into the groundwater, and finally, just electricity, education, and subsidies that will make houses more energy efficient will all allow cities to be more sustainable. Additionally, increasing air quality and allowing more green space and infrastructure will allow for better health and well-being for the community. I'll now pass it back to Lily to finish discussing our project.
Wrong slide. Sorry about that. Moving forward, we're planning on hosting a geodesign workshop, bringing together a variety of key stakeholders from public, private, and nonprofit sectors, as well as community organizations, and most importantly, the residents themselves. We will follow up with a summary report discussing the workshop's findings and hope to continue building momentum towards viable proposals for pilot superblocks. And as individuals explore opportunities to implement superblock pilots, we plan to stay closely involved in conducting research and neighborhood health assessments. That is all we have for you today. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions about our project, please feel free to come up to any of the 3 of us during the coffee hour. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And next presentation is from Christine Wachter, who's from the Savannah College of Art and Design in my own good state of Georgia, and she's going to be talking to us about Savannah 21.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. My name is Christine Wachter, and here I'm going to be presenting the work from a little different angle. This is from the School of Architecture. This is a 4th-year architectural program, and the studio has a focus on urban design. The work that I'm going to show you, it's a work of 3 students because the studio was divided into different groups. First, let me tell you a little bit about Savannah. Savannah is on the southeast of the United States. It's a city that really combines a lot of opportunity that many cities do not have. It is by the water. I don't know where's the, oh, that's it. As you can see, it is by the water, and we have the largest port in the southeast of the United States. And also the city has the river right downtown that goes through downtown. The next thing that you have to know about Savannah is the master plan, the plan of the city that has a lot of little squares. So the city urban planning was really made for people to gather. It's a city that is designed for human interaction for the people. Unfortunately, in the last many years, the car has made its way into the city, pushing people outside of the street. Savannah also has, it's 20 minutes from the ocean. So we have all of those different amenities, and you could see the city, a lot of trees. The city looks like an urban forest. So it's a city that is really rich in all of the environment benefit that it offers. Unfortunately, in the last few years, Savannah, like many other cities around the coast, have been hit by a hurricane. What pointed to this project is that the city of Savannah built, I think in 2015, a hurricane shelter. So it spent $5 million to build a hurricane shelter. Our thought was to think about, do we rather build hurricane shelter and go hide while the city is getting wiped away? Or should we start putting the money toward building this city so we can live with our environment in a way that is safe and that is resilient? And that's what pointed this project. That's what made us start working on this project. So we went through many different requirements, and at first, we started this project really not having a site. The site happened after we have done some analysis. We went out, I sent the student out to actually record the geography, the feelings, how they felt in areas. And this first interaction with the city was really a way for them to start kind of thinking about what they know about the city. The advantage that we have is that we knew the city. They knew their way around the city. They had their judgment about what area was good, what area was bad. So we went through the city kind of recording all of this information. The next time they went into the city, they talked to the people living in the place to record more. And the last thing that we did was to actually look at data. Each student came up with all of the information that they had, and we had to actually contrast and compare it with the data that we had. And that's where we came out with all of this, all of what you have on board. So we realized that the population was going to continue to grow. There was a supply and distribution of energy that was needed. We have to bring out, the built environment will be more networked and smarter should be. Sea level rise was an issue. Food production and pressure, we had all of those pollution concerns because of a lot of cars in the city. So all of this list of requirements came from that first, interaction. And the innovation that we thought about doing were all of those lists, actually we ran out of room to put more, on. So with that, we start thinking about the very first one, the very important one was really the sea level rise. And the fact that we are right by the water. We have an area that is kind of the industrial area over there where nothing really happened. And that became really an opportunity for us to create this high-tech area, because on top of that, one of the things that we realized in Savannah through our analysis was the fact that we have the best art school in the country, but yet all of the students who graduate, they have to go somewhere else. So how do we create a city where those kids who graduate kind of keep, stay into the city so that the city could keep its intellectual capacity? And that's what actually prompted us to start creating, those type of connection and this, thinking about the mobility, making sure that we have hyperloop, because the city was going to be growing a lot. The density was going to increase, but yet, if we already have flooding, we couldn't add more houses around town because we didn't have enough room for that. So we had to start thinking about how do we go higher instead of lower. So if you look at this, all of these project expectations, those are basically how we went through this process. And this is the technology workflow. These are the software that we were able to use to go through all of this. We also found out through our analysis that the city was mostly used by tourists, and there were a lot of empty housing throughout the year. Local people who work in the city couldn't afford to live inside the city, but yet we had a lot of empty or vacant houses all over, all throughout the year. So we decided to maybe find a way to actually bring this, together, or bring that in a way that we could have people living into the city. Another thing that we found out in the city, and this was through you could see all of the students, we call that the derive, where they walk through the city and record all of the information, the fear. And here you have a legend of area that have light versus area that don't have lights. Homelessness, where they feel that the safety is an issue. And this is just based on what they are feeling. And then when we actually compare it with the data, we realize that a lot of time what we feel is not necessarily what it is. So you could see how we were able to actually put those data together. Also, the job was an issue. So this is how we actually record job throughout the street. And you could see, we saw what we were missing in some area. Building, we had to actually come up with a really good way of building so that we could actually create those modular houses that will actually bring light. And this one here, actually it's a video, I don't know if it will play, but that will be actually a way of creating, this hyperloop. It's not, well, I'm not sure that. Yeah, I think I ran out of it. So yes, and those were basically just, how did we actually bring all of those different, data together to be able to put this project together. So that will be the hyperloop that will actually connect the city with other areas. And this was the master plan of that area of technology where we will actually allow the student to be able to stay there with the intellectual capacity of the city staying right there. Alga for resilience, and this was really using the landscape to actually recreate the city as we want it to be. Thank you.
And our last presentation is going to be from Yashuan Gu from the University of Cincinnati. And she is going to talk about, sorry, I lost my place, a membrane neighborhood in Cincinnati. Sorry.
Thank you, Brian. So first, I think what makes geodesign so distinct is because geodesign helps us integrate the science with design. So in this project, based on my previous 2 years of teaching geodesign studio in Illinois, this year, I started to think about how can we literally dig out the innovation technologies and innovative methodologies out of geodesign framework. So I think people without a design, they can use geodesign to design stuff. And similarly, designers without science could use geodesign to learn how to use the scientific knowledge for us to integrate it into the geodesign, into the design in landscape. So in today's project, I would like to have a designer's perspective. So I would like to see the geodesign's capacity on the design innovation. And so in this studio, I mixed geodesign with a lot of traditional design methodology. And this is Camp Washington, a neighborhood that is very close to Cincinnati campus. And there are a lot of issues, for example, flooding issue, water quality, and also food desert. So all of the adopters are developed by considering how can we use the prototypes that I'm going to show you in the later slides, to use that to implement the prototypes into the different areas of the site. And there are 4 systems we're focused on: agricultural system in terms of urban farms, transportation system, green infrastructure system, and also the agro-tourism system. So the innovations we focused on is mainly about agro-tourism and also the permeable pavement, not only as a way to infiltrate water, but also to purify water quality. And so we have a lot of workshops with our clients, with our residents in the Camp Washington, and also the stakeholders. We try to use different representation skills to communicate with the residents. So we find this model and also use a projection to project all of the different layers of GIS to let them have a better understanding of the topo map and the location of the sites within the whole Cincinnati region. And we kind of use this kind of interactive interface to help our clients to understand the whole space. So we look more into the details of hydrology and also the ecosystem. So we get into the next phase is our scientific research. So I think geodesign is mainly, if you are not designers, geodesign can help you understand how can we do a design process by process. If you're a designer without no scientific experiment, we can use the geodesign framework to help us understand our scientific article, to understand a scientific field you never touched on. So by working with soil experts, a lot of my students get into the field to collect soil from the sites, and by mixing with water, so the soil experts give us some basic knowledge about what we can do to observe the soil components out of the scientific research. So we observe the minerals and also the organic matters, and after doing that, we look into membrane, so especially the nanofiltration membrane and also the forward osmosis membrane, which is a very useful technology in wastewater treatment, to use the microscope and also SEM images to observe their structures and patterns and their porosities and also contact angles. So after that, students produce a lot of parametric design to 3D print different prototype models, and they use water and soil to just put on the models to test in terms of evaluation model and also impact model to help us understand if this design is really workable for water infiltration and also for water purification of the water quality, to increase the water quality. So this is kind of like a very brief understanding of how students integrate the parametric design, which use parameters a lot, to thinking about how we use parameters in geodesign. And they have several parameters inspired from the membranes, including permeability of the whole model, and also contact angle of the different hexagons, and also porosity to infiltrate water. They generate different 3D printing models. And then students get into more specific into the 4 system, into very site-specific design. And for example, agricultural system, they integrate urban farms into the design, and also social system, they have this community gathering place for the users to experience the whole landscape. And So it's a mixture of land use forms and technologies for water infiltration method, and also talk about how can we bring out the urban farms to integrate the food issue. So those are my lovely students and lovely clients. And so I would like to discuss a little bit of the design opportunities out of geodesign, because I got a lot of complaints from my previous students. They think geodesign is kind of limits their imagination. Well, however, in this year, all of my students, they have no design background at all, no landscape experience. They are first-year graduate students. And I introduced the geodesign in a seminar, and then also they can work on their stuff in the studio. So there is kind of like a theory and implementation. So I feel like non-designers can really use the geodesign very effectively to do design, and also we, without a scientific knowledge, can use this for literally integrate science into design. So, however, I feel like without technology, it's really hard to give us a chance to think about the feedbacks from the 6 models, to think about how can we use that in the landscape design. And I think another very important aspect of geodesign for me is geodesign is not only for large scale. I think because I have the background also in wastewater treatment, I think geodesign is also for working for nanoscale, micro scale, macro scale, and also the mega scale. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Yashwan. Let's have a round of applause for all the presenters this morning.